That night with my son, Aiden, was by far the most emotionally charged and unforgettable experience of my life. My name is Daniel, and I want to share something deeply personal, a journey between a grieving father and a son, one that changed both of us forever. It is not easy to talk about, but it is something I have carried within me for years. Aiden is 19 now, but this all began shortly after we lost my wife, Emma. Losing her was the hardest thing I have ever endured. Her absence created a silence in a house that echoed through every corner, and both Aiden and I were left to face life without her. In the beginning, everything felt heavy. Aiden became withdrawn, spending hours locked away in his room or disappearing with friends. He avoided talking about Emma, her laughter, her voice, even her name. I wanted to give him space, not pressure him to open up. So instead, I tried to keep our home warm. I cooked his favorite meals, left little notes by his desk reminding him I was proud of him, and quietly made sure he knew that whenever he was ready, I was here. But weeks passed, then months. He stayed distant. One evening, as I washed the dishes after dinner, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw Aiden standing there. It startled me, honestly. He rarely came into the kitchen unless he needed something. "Need any help, Dad?" he asked. His voice was soft, unsure, but sincere. I smiled, surprised. "Sure, you can dry," I said, handing him a towel. We stood side by side, working silently. It felt unfamiliar yet comforting. The quiet between us wasn't heavy this time. It was calm. I glanced at him. "How was school today?" He shrugged, still drying. "It was all right." That was it. No extra words. I didn't push him. "Just remember," I said gently, "if you ever want to talk, I'm here." He nodded slightly. No words. But something told me he heard me. Over the next few weeks, I noticed changes. Little ones at first. Aiden started sitting with me while I watched TV. He lingered in the kitchen as I cooked. He even started sharing things, not deep emotional things, but stories about college, his classmates, his goals. It was like the wall between us was starting to crack. And I held on to that hope. One night, he cooked dinner, a simple pasta dish he had learned from a friend. As we sat across from each other at the table, he looked up and said, "You're an amazing dad." I laughed softly, brushing off the compliment. "Thanks, Aiden. That means a lot." But he didn't laugh. He held my gaze with a seriousness that made my breath catch. "What's on your mind?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nothing. Just thank you for everything." I nodded, unsure what to say. There was something unspoken in his tone, not uncomfortable, just raw, real, vulnerable. After that evening, he continued spending more time with me, helping with chores, sitting closer during movie nights. At first, I thought he was just reconnecting after months of grief, try to find comfort in presence. But there was something more, a new level of attentiveness, a sense of care I hadn't seen before. One morning, as I stood at the kitchen sink, still in my pajamas and groggy, he walked in and said, "You look nice today, Dad." I chuckled. "Thanks, buddy." I replied, try and keep the mood light. But the compliment, though kind, stayed with me all day. Another evening, we watched a movie we had seen countless times before. He sat so close that our shoulders touched. I shifted a little, but he didn't move. Then, during a quiet moment, he said, "You're always doing something for someone else. You never rest." I smiled. That's what dads do. Always something that needs fixing. He didn't laugh. His eyes stayed on me. "You deserve rest too." His words stayed with me long after he went to bed. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Not because I was worried, but because I was overwhelmed by something I hadn't felt in years. Connection, the kind that doesn't need words. Over the following days, Aiden continued to gravitate toward me. If I was out in the garden, he would come sit near me. If I was reading, he would join me and just sit in silence. Sometimes he would talk about Emma, sometimes not. But each moment we shared felt like a step forward, a healing of sorts. It was as if we were rediscovering each other, not just as father and son, but as two people learning how to live after heartbreak. The compliments didn't stop. I like it when you smile, Dad. You're stronger than you think. Simple words. But each one felt like a thread, sewing together the gap that had opened between us. And even though I still questioned what was changing, one thing was clear. I was no longer alone in my grief. We were learning together how to be a family again. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry in the living room, Aiden walked in and leaned against the doorway. He watched me for a moment, then said softly, "You make this house feel alive again." I froze, the towel in my hands half folded. His words caught me off guard. I managed a small smile. "Thank you, Aiden," I said, but something in my chest tightened. I could not explain it, but the way he said it stirred an odd kind of unease within me. I tried to push it aside, convincing myself that I was just being overly sensitive. Maybe he was simply trying to be kind. Maybe it was his way of making up for the silence that had stretched between us after Emma passed away. But it wasn't just his words anymore. It was how often he seemed to be nearby, always watching me, always finding reasons to linger close. And if I was being honest, I was doing the same. One evening, I was preparing dinner. The chopping of vegetables filled the kitchen with a comforting rhythm. I heard soft footsteps behind me, and without turning, I already knew it was Aiden. I kept my focus on the cutting board, hoping he'd just grab a snack and leave. "Do you need help, Dad?" he asked. I turned slightly and gave him a smile. "Sure, you can slice these carrots," I said, sliding over the cutting board. He stepped beside me and began chopping with slow, careful movements. We worked in silence for a while, and for a moment, I thought it might just be a simple, peaceful interaction. But then he stopped cutting and turned toward me. "You've done so much for me," he said quietly. I looked over, unsure what he meant. "What do you mean?" "I mean, after Mom died, you took care of everything. You held it all together. You didn't have to, but you did." His eyes locked with mine, sincere and steady. The honesty in his voice moved me. "Of course I did," I replied gently. "You're my son, Aiden. I love you." He nodded, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "I don't think I've ever said thank you for everything." "You don't need to thank me," I said quickly, turning back to the stove. "That's what dads do." He didn't answer. I could still feel his gaze on me, heavy and searching. The moment felt too intense, too quiet. I wanted it to pass. Finally, he picked the knife back up and started chopping again. I let out a small, shaky breath and focused on the pot simmering in front of me. That night, after dinner, I sat down on the couch with a book. I wanted to escape into fiction, if only for a little while. Aiden came into the living room, and instead of sitting at his usual spot on the far end of the couch, he sat right beside me. "What are you reading?" he asked, leaning closer to see the cover. "Just a novel," I said, holding it up for him. "Nothing too exciting." "Can I read it with you?" he asked. The question surprised me. He hadn't been interested in reading since he was a kid, and I could not recall the last time we shared a book together. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect my space, to let my mind rest, but another part of me didn't want to discourage him, not when we were finally rebuilding something. "Sure," I said, scooting over a little. He leaned in, his shoulder brushing mine, and I began reading aloud. At first, it felt innocent, even nostalgic, like when he was younger, and I read to him every night. But as the minutes passed, I noticed he wasn't following the story. He was watching me, not the book. When I reached the end of the chapter, I closed it gently and set it aside. "That's enough for tonight," I said with a forced lightness. "Thanks for reading to me," he said softly. "You're welcome," I replied, standing up and heading toward my room. "Good night, Aiden." "Good night, Dad," he said, but there was a subtle shift in his voice, something I could not quite place. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Aiden already there. He had made coffee and set out breakfast, something he hadn't done in years. "Good morning, Dad," he said cheerfully. "I made you some coffee." "Thank you," I said cautiously, sitting at the table. The warm mug in my hand felt oddly heavy. He sat across from me, smiling. "You work so hard," he said. "You deserve to be taken care of too." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "That's very sweet of you," I said finally, "but you don't have to do all this for me." "I want to," he said firmly. After breakfast, I slipped away to the garden. The air was cool and fresh, and the scent of blooming jasmine lingered in the breeze. I sat on a wooden bench, trying to clear my head. My thoughts had become a tangled mess, moments piling on top of each other, emotions that did not quite make sense. I was still lost in thought when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw Aiden walking toward me, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. "Can I sit with you?" he asked. "Of course," I said, though a part of me wanted to be alone. He sat down beside me, leaving a respectful space between us. For a while, neither of us spoke. The garden was quiet except for the rustling leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. "You've been quiet lately," he said after a long pause. "I've just had a lot on my mind," I replied, eyes still fixed on the hedges. "Is it about me?" he asked gently. His question caught me off guard. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Why would you think that?" I asked. He shrugged. "I don't know. I just feel like maybe I've upset you." "You haven't upset me," I said quickly. "I've just been tired." He nodded but didn't say anything more. A few moments later, he stood up. "I'll leave you alone," he said quietly. I watched him walk away, unsure what exactly was weighing on either of us, only that something was shifting between us, something neither of us yet understood. I watched Aiden walk back into the house, a knot tightening in my chest. He had not done anything wrong. Not really. So why did I feel so unsettled? The following days felt off, like a heavy cloud had parked itself over our home. I went through the motions, cooking meals, tidying up, handling daily chores. But the air between us had shifted. Even the silence carried weight now. Aiden hadn't said anything strange, hadn't crossed any lines, but his presence around me felt different. I could not tell if I was overthinking it, if I was just reacting to the grief, the loneliness, or if something deeper was changing. And maybe I was changing, too. One night, I made a decision. I needed space. After dinner, I retreated to my room earlier than usual. I curled up with a book under the warm glow of the bedside lamp. The quiet felt like a blessing, a moment of peace I did not know I needed. I tried to lose myself in the story, but part of me was still tangled in thoughts about Aiden, the way he had been looking at me lately, the way his presence lingered even after he left the room. For the first time, I recognized a strange tension between us, and it startled me, not because of him, but because of how I was reacting to it. Then, just as I began to settle into the stillness, there was a soft knock at the door. "Dad." Aiden's voice was quiet, unsure. I hesitated. "Yes." "Can I come in?" I glanced at the clock. It was late, well past his usual bedtime. "Is something wrong?" I asked, setting my book down and sitting up. I wanted to talk." I sighed gently. "Come in." The door opened slowly, and Aiden stepped inside. His face looked different somehow, not as confident as usual. There was something vulnerable in his eyes, something reminiscent of the nights long ago when I used to comfort him after bad dreams. He stood there, hovering in the doorway. "What's on your mind?" I asked, patting the edge of the bed. He sat down carefully, moving slowly, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then, finally, his eyes lifted to mine. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" I asked cautiously. "For making things feel weird. I know I've been acting differently lately. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." His honesty caught me off guard. "Aiden," I started, but he continued. "I don't really know how to handle everything I've been feeling," he said, voice cracking just slightly. "But I never meant to cross a line or make things strange." His words were full of meaning he may not have fully understood himself. But what I saw in that moment was a young man, struggling to process emotion in the shadow of loss. I reached out and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed," I said softly. "We've both been through a lot. But it's important to remember I'm your dad, and we both need space to heal." He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. "I know. I'm really sorry." I gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze, then pulled my hand back. "Let's not worry about it too much right now," I said, Try and keep the tone easy. We'll figure this out together." He nodded again and stood up. "Good night, Dad," he said softly. "Good night, Aiden," I replied. As I watched him leave the room, a mix of emotions swirled inside me. Relief, sadness, confusion, but also a strange sense of hope, because he had acknowledged what was happening, and that, at least, felt like a step forward. Still, I could not ignore the quiet voice inside me that whispered, "This might not be over yet," and I was right. The next morning, I woke feeling more drained than usual. The late-night conversation had kept my mind racing for hours, replaying every word, questioning every emotion. I got up, went through my morning routine, and tried to shake the haze that hung over me. Aiden kept himself most of that day. He stayed in his room, and the house felt oddly quiet. Part of me wanted to check on him. Another part felt like he needed the space to think. So I let him be. That evening, I was folding laundry in the living room when Aiden came in. He didn't say anything at first, just sat quietly on the couch, watching me. The silence between us was thick, but not cold, just heavy with things unspoken. "You've been quiet today," I said eventually, looking over at him. He shrugged. "Just thinking." "About anything in particular?" His voice was barely audible. "About us." I stopped folding for a moment, his words hitting a tender place. "What do you mean?" I asked gently. He looked up, meeting my eyes. "I know things have been off, and I don't want to stay that way." I nodded slowly, unsure what to say. "I don't want that either. I want us to be okay. But we need to be honest and clear with ourselves and each other." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "We will be." And for a moment, just a flicker, I believe him. I believe we could find our way back to something steady, something real. But even in that moment of hope, something lingered deep down, a feeling I couldn't name. Maybe I didn't fully understand it, or maybe I did and just wasn't ready to admit it. But I wasn't ready to accept it yet. The heaviness in the air, the quiet unease that refused to lift. Aiden tried to act normal, but I could see the weight in his eyes, the way he paused before speaking, the moments he hovered when we crossed paths. I told myself his apology had resolved everything, that the tension had been aired out and left behind. But I knew, deep down, it wasn't that simple. One evening, as I lay in bed scrolling through my phone to relax, the silence in the house grew thick. The only sound was the soft creak of the ceiling fan above. My eyelids had just started to close when a gentle knock came at my door. "Dad?" Aiden's voice was low, uncertain. I sat up, my stomach sinking. "Yes." "Can I come in?" I glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight. "Aiden, it's late," I said, trying to sound firm. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause. I need to talk." There was something in his voice that made me pause. I sighed quietly and replied, "Okay, come in." The door creaked open. Aiden stepped inside, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders hunched. He didn't look like the confident young man I was used to seeing. He looked like a boy again, unsure, vulnerable. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. He hesitated. His eyes darted to the floor, then back to me. "I've been thinking a lot about what I said the other night." I nodded, unsure where this was going, and I feel like I need to be honest with myself and with you. My chest tightened. "Honest about what?" He moved slowly to sit on the edge of the bed. "About how I've been feeling since Mom passed, since everything changed." His voice trembled slightly. "I felt lost, Dad, really lost. And sometimes it feels like you're the only person who still sees me, who still listens." I stayed quiet, watching him closely. "I don't know what's going on inside me most days," he admitted, his voice cracking. "It's like my emotions are all tangled. And sometimes I think I confuse comfort with something else. And I hate that. I hate that it's made things weird between us." I exhaled slowly. "Aiden," "Thank you for saying that." He looked up, his eyes glistening. "I just needed you to know I'm sorry if I made things confusing. I never meant to. I think I just wanted to feel safe." I reached out, and placed my hand on his shoulder. You've been through a lot. We both have. And it's okay to feel overwhelmed. But I'm your father, Aiden. My job is to protect you. That includes helping you understand what you're feeling and reminding you of where our boundaries are. He nodded, his shoulders sagging with the weight of it all. I know. I do. You're not broken, I said gently. You're just hurting. But all of this, we can work through it. Together. No shame. No fear. He wiped his eyes and gave a small nod. Good night, Dad. Good night, I said, watching him leave and softly close the door. I sat there for a long time afterward, the glow of my bedside lamp casting shadows across the room. My hands trembled slightly as I locked the door and sat back down. My heart felt heavy, not with anger, but with sadness and love. Love for a son trying to find his way in the aftermath of pain. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying Aiden's words, trying to sort through the meaning, trying to remind myself that grief affects people in strange, unpredictable ways. Maybe this was a phase. Maybe it would pass. I wanted to believe that. The next morning, Aiden was unusually quiet at breakfast. He barely touched his food, and when he left for class, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I spent the day buried in work, but my mind drifted back again and again to the night before. Was he okay? Were we okay? That evening when Aiden came home, he didn't say much. He avoided eye contact and disappeared into his room. I wanted to talk to him, to say something comforting, but I didn't know where to begin. I didn't want to say the wrong thing and undo the fragile honesty we'd managed to reach. Later that night, I sat alone in the living room. The television was on, but I wasn't watching it. I was too lost in my own thoughts. The weight of the last few days sat on my shoulders like a boulder. Then I heard soft footsteps. I turned to see Aiden in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes looked tired. "Can I sit with you?" he asked. I hesitated for a brief second, then nodded. "Of course." He walked over and sat down beside me, leaving a respectful space between us. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, but no longer unbearable. "Dad," he said quietly, "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said quickly, "but we do need to keep clear boundaries, Aiden, for both of us." He nodded slowly. "I understand." I placed a hand gently on his knee. "We'll get through this, but you have to trust me. Let's take it one day at a time." He looked up, eyes filled with emotion. "I do trust you." I gave a small smile. "Then we'll be okay." In that moment, I believed it. The road ahead would not be easy. But as long as we were both willing to keep talking, to stay honest and kind, I knew we could heal. The days that followed were quiet, tense but calm. Aiden kept some distance, and I gave him space. I tried to keep the house running as usual, but the truth hung in the air like an invisible thread. Always there, always stretching. But I held on to hope, because healing takes time. And we were still standing, together. I had hoped that setting boundaries and acknowledging our emotions would be enough to help us move forward. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The silence between us still hummed with everything we hadn't said. Something broken inside both of us hadn't healed yet, and pretending otherwise would only bury it deeper. One night, after a long day of trying to stay distracted, I went to bed early. I was mentally drained, worn out from trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling too far. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that almost rang in your ears. The soft night air drifted through the open window, and the ceiling fan's hum set a slow rhythm in the room. I lay there, eyes closed, try to let sleep take over. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, I was pulled from sleep by the soft creak of the door. "Aiden," I said instinctively. His voice came quietly from the doorway. "Yeah, it's me." I reached over and turned on the lamp. The soft glow filled the room, casting long shadows. He stood there in the doorway, not with fear, but with hesitation. His hands fidgeted at his sides, and something about his posture told me he wasn't sure whether to come in or walk away. "What is it?" I asked, my voice thick from sleep. He took a few cautious steps in. I couldn't sleep, he admitted. I just needed to talk. I sat up and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. Aiden, we've had some tough conversations lately. I need to know, are you okay? He nodded, but the movement was slow. I'm trying to be, he said, sitting down on the edge of the bed, but everything's still so heavy. I know, I replied. It is for me too. I feel like I messed everything up, he said, voice shaking. I didn't mean to. You didn't mess anything up, I said gently. You're grieving and confused and reaching out. That's not failure. That's being human. But it doesn't feel normal, he muttered, wiping at his eyes. I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel anymore. I placed a hand on his back. Aiden, we both lost someone who meant the world to us. And sometimes in grief, our emotions blur lines that should be clear. It's okay to be confused. What matters is what we do with that confusion. He nodded slowly. I just don't want to lose the only person I have left. You're not going to, I said firmly, but part of staying close means respecting each other's space. That's how we stay strong, by being honest and careful with each other. He looked at me, eyes red-rimmed but focused. You really mean that? I do, and I want to help you. I want us to move forward, not forget, but grow. There was a long silence between us, but this time it didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like the quiet that comes after a storm. The air still thick with emotion, but slowly clearing. Eventually, I said, try to get some sleep tonight. We'll talk more tomorrow. He stood, nodding. Okay, good night, Dad. Good night, Aiden. When he left the room, I sat back on the bed, my heart aching. Not from fear anymore, but from hope. Hope that this was the beginning of something better. Not instant healing, but understanding. Not perfect, but real. And somehow in the stillness that followed, I finally let myself breathe. We were both trying to move on, each in our own way. That evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the sun dip beneath the horizon, a quiet calm settled between us. The kind that only comes after a long storm. The light painted the sky in warm gold and deep violet, and for a few moments, neither of us said anything. Then Aiden turned to me, his voice gentle. Thanks for being patient with me, Dad, he said. Thank you for everything you've done, for listening, for being there, even when I was hard to be around, and for accepting me, even when I didn't know how to accept myself. I looked at him, a little taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. But mostly I felt proud of him, of us, for making it through the worst of it. I placed a hand on his arm and offered a quiet smile. That's what dads do, I said softly. We stand by you, even when it's hard, especially then. He smiled back, and this time it felt real. No tension, no confusion, just a father and his son, sitting in the fading light of the day, slowly healing. And in that moment, I truly believed we were going to be okay. There are still things I do not fully understand about grief, about love, about the messiness of healing. The past few months have been a blur of pain, memories, and trying to do right by each other. But this story, this journey we've been on, I needed to tell it. Not because I had all the answers, but because maybe someone else out there is walking through something similar. Maybe someone else has lost a partner and is struggling to hold their family together. Maybe someone else is trying to reconnect with their child after unimaginable loss. I do not know what the future holds for Aiden and me. I just know that we're working on it, day by day, moment by moment. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. It means more than I can say. Let us all keep choosing love, the kind that heals, the kind that protects, the kind that lasts.